Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 15 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. I had such a great discussion with Shelly Bathe Lenn for this episode. Shelly runs The Garden, a center for grieving children and teens in Northampton, Massachusetts. Shelly and I had a wide-ranging discussion covering topics such as helping kids feel safe after loss, helping children express feelings after loss, the importance of commemorating a loved one, being truthful with kids even when difficult circumstances surround a death, how parents can model healthy grief and emotions, running grief groups in schools, and book recommendations. I hope you enjoy my discussion with Shelly Bathe Lenn. My guest today is Shelly Bathe Lenn, who runs The Garden, a center for grieving children and teens. She is joining us from her office in Northampton, Massachusetts. Shelly, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Jenny.
Hi. Let's start out by talking a little bit about The Garden. First of all, so you're in Western Massachusetts, right?
Yep, Western Massachusetts. So The Garden opened 20 years ago, and we work with families who have young children being defined as 5 years to 18.
Okay.
They come to us after the death of someone close. So for the majority of our families, it's children remembering a parent who has died or a sibling, but we also welcome those if there was a grandparent that they lived with or saw very frequently, or even for our teen population, we welcome those remembering a friend.
Okay.
And we have an on-site program. We're a program of Cooley Dickinson Healthcare, and our on-site program is a family support program. So the whole family comes to the garden, and after an opening circle, we break up into small groups. Our adults are in a group. Our kids are in groups based on age. And in the kids groups, they're doing activities, projects, and games that support them wherever they're at on that given day. And meanwhile, in our adult group, we are giving the adults a place to talk about the challenges of raising grieving children while also grieving themselves. And, it's really hard to separate that because oftentimes, pretty much all the time, parents come to us because they're catapulted into single parenting, and it's really hard to separate the challenges, their adult challenges of parenting and their own grief. And so we wrestle through all of that in our adult group. We work with families. We have a fall program that meets on Sunday afternoons for 8 consecutive Sundays. And then our spring program, which we're getting ready to open in the end of February, lasts for 10 weeks. And it's an amazing program in the sense that, bring people together who share the experience of someone in their life dying. And we kind of give them a place to kind of grow and seed and get support from each other. In my years at the garden, I've seen 2 weddings from families who have met here at the garden, and it's just one end of the spectrum in terms of what can happen here. But
Sure.
Yeah, so our family support program is the bulk of what we do. But 10 years ago, I developed a program where I go out into the schools, partner with the schools to identify kids who are in this population. Someone close in their life has died, and then I come in once a week and work with a small group of kids for 8 weeks.
And that sounds interesting. Yeah. Is that at the elementary level, middle school, high school?
It's all levels. So right now, actually, I have 2 high school groups going on at one school, and then a middle school this year. Every year is different, but I can do it at all levels and have done it at all levels. I love it because it's the group. It's the time when I get to work with the kids, and especially on site when the families are here, I work with the adults. So,
okay.
It's a pretty amazing program in terms of going to the schools. So we partner with them. It's free of charge, and we just have to kind of coordinate a space and getting the kids to the group and that kind of thing. But the kids just find that even though it's just an hour a week, it's that one time in their week where they can remember the person who has died and maybe talk about them and then meet others as well.
So I'm curious about that, actually, because I've occasionally heard of schools doing a program like that, maybe even just on their own in their counseling center. But I guess I've been curious how that works. Like, do those kids miss, fourth period every single Monday, or do they miss their lunch, or how? And is that difficult to? I guess
it's different in every school. Always remember the one school that felt like the only time they could do this or have this group for their students was after school. And I did it after school, but as you can imagine, my attendance rate was pretty up and down. Kids didn't want to stay after school to talk about this, so I never did after school again. I have pretty flexible. So if the school is really hard nosed on, I don't mean to offend any schools, but nope, they can't miss this. So what I've suggested and have done is, okay, how about this week I come in the morning, the next week I come in the afternoon, and that way they only miss 4 weeks of one period in the morning and 4 weeks in the afternoon.
I see.
I have also done lunch periods, and that is also doesn't work very well. One is, the lunchtime is a real social time for kids, and the last thing they want to do is to come be with me. And then just the time it takes to go get their food from the cafeteria and come to me, we lose time. So, so what I tell schools is, if it's not like, they're totally focused on math when they're in math class. So for a child who is grieving, oftentimes it consumes their thinking. And so it doesn't necessarily get turned off when they're in math or wherever they are during the school day. So if we can, give them a time to think about it, it can actually help them be a stronger student because they've kind of gotten that out, so to speak, in my group.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of been my argument, but I haven't had to actually utilize it that much. And then the last scenario, like actually what I'm doing right now at the middle school, I don't quite understand it because I just got there, but they have an extended day, 1 day a week. And so what I'm doing is they leave their last period, they come to me during this extra period. And I think the school as a whole has this longer day is dedicated to, I think they said, like community service or whatnot. So, but anyway, that was a creative way to give me an hour and not have to, totally infringe on a lot of academic stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, thank you for explaining that, because I've been curious how that would work, particularly at the older grade levels. In grade school, I assume it's pretty easy to just pull them out and
right, sort
it out somehow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, we're upfront with the students and their families that, they're going to miss this period. Sometimes teachers or the school folks that I work with will, straddle 2 classes. So they, don't miss the entirety of one class.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. It's just different in each school.
Okay. All right. So there's a few other topics I would love to ask you about.
Great.
Something that comes up sometimes is helping, how to help children feel safe after somebody close to them has died. And I guess the first question is that something that you see, or why do you think that kids might not feel safe? Why do you think that problem exists in the first place?
Yeah, well, what we have seen is that kids begin to get worried after someone in their life has died. They begin to get worried about, is that going to happen to me? Is that going to happen? Who else is it going to happen to? Especially in a sudden death, I see it a lot. That car accident wasn't supposed to happen. So then they can start to worry about who is it going to happen to next. But that's a car accident. I've also seen it happen in even in another kind of sudden death, maybe arrhythmia or, a seizure that led to a death, kids can worry about, because they have questions in their head about what actually happened, and they're trying to understand it. And so they're taking it right to heart. Is this going to happen to me? And I'll never forget the story of a family that came, mom died suddenly, and the youngest child kind of developed hypochondriosis. Every scrape, every bruise, he got really worried. It's not going away. What is this? Should we go to the doctor? And in his little head, in his young head, I should say, he was, trying to understand what happened to the parent through, his own, these things weren't healing as quickly, quote unquote, as they should have. And so that has come up time and time again. And so with that thinking, and parents will tell me too that they're worried, and they hear it like at nighttime, Mom, can you leave a light on because I want to make sure I can see things. So little pieces like that have led me to this idea that kids need a sense of safety, and safety in two different ways. One is the physical safety of themselves and others around them, but then also, health-wise, physiologically. But then there's also the safety they need and crave in a consistent routine, in traditions, in a schedule. And so there's a lot that families can do to support both of those things. One is, the end-all be-all message is all living things die. Most people live to be very, 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 very old, and we can cite, our 98-year-old whoever, grandmother, great-grandmother. But this is what I'm doing to be here for you as long as I can. And so then kids need, okay, prove it. How are you doing this? And so then there's things that, we all do, from wearing our seatbelts in a car because it's a law, to following safety laws, again, because it's a law. And so for parents who are in the acute stages of grief after the death of someone close, what I suggest and invite them to do is shine a spotlight on those little things that they've been doing, day in and day out, but draw a spotlight on it. So for example, we're getting in the car. Okay, I've got my seatbelt on. Everybody in the back got their seatbelt on. Just kind of highlighting that, sprinkling it into the conversation, every few days. And it's my belief that when that's sprinkled in, then kids can start to jump on that train and feel safe on the inside. But it's not just car related either. It's, bicycle, riding their bikes with lights and helmets, looking both ways when we cross the street. In the house, it might be making sure the doors are locked or having outside lights on, that kind of thing. And for really young children, that could be, actually, I remember doing this with my son who isn't grieving, but he used to have worries, nighttime worries. And so I took him around to every window and said, this is how we lock. Oh, this one's locked. Let's see. Let's check that one. Is that one locked? And we went around, we actually did it. And after a period, not too long, but, after a period of time of doing that, then he could kind of integrate that into his young brain that, okay, yeah, no one's going to come into our house because the doors and windows are locked. So those are kinds of things that can help, feel physiologically or feel physically safe. In terms of our health, it's also in keeping and a way to prove to our kids that we're doing everything we can to be here for them for as long as we can. Then we highlight our doctor's appointments. Oh, my physical's coming up. That children don't need a lot of details about it, but just to hear, oh, mom's got an appointment coming up. And then maybe afterwards, oh, everything's all checked out. My weight's good. I'm eating fine. I maybe, need to do more walking. Give a little bit of a synopsis to that child, proving, A, that you went to the visit, and 2, that, your doctor does think that you're doing okay. And then the same goes for them. this is why we all go to our doctor's appointments. We all go to our dentist appointments. And you can also talk about the food that you eat and whatever is true for that family. That's where, can get a little tricky. We don't want to say things that aren't true. If this is a family that, for whatever reason doesn't do any of those things, then don't say them, but do things that are true. We've got to be truthful to our kids. But I list all these things because I would hope that, there's at least a couple of those things that are true and then that the parents could actually say to their kids. But, in our family, think about how we move our body for exercise, and that keeps our body healthy, and the foods that we eat. And, this is why we have such a, colorful array of foods on our plate, at dinner time, because that keeps us healthy. So it's all those little examples that can be given to kids so that they can digest it and integrate it as to, oh, yeah, okay, we are doing what we can to be here for each other. So that piece, those are ways to kind of help kids feel safe. And then the other part is in the day-to-day and the routine and and being consistent. I always hear that kids, families will come to me and say, I can't believe it. He wanted to go back to school the next day. And I remind them that school is the one place, or maybe one of a few places where kids know what to expect. They know their schedule, they know which class comes after what, they know where they sit, they know their teachers' names, those kinds of things. And that gives them a sense of safety. So it's that same, and because they know what to expect at school, sometimes kids can want to get right back there as opposed to staying at home where they have no idea what's going to happen next because their world is in a topsy-turvy right now after mom or dad or sister or brother's death, which makes sense. It doesn't mean that they're going to be focused on school while they're there, as I was saying earlier, but that routine of knowing what to expect can be a real sense of safety for kids. And so using that as a model, the same thing at home. And for some families, this is, may be one of a few times that they've, kind of get this kind of information, but the importance of having routines at home. So the morning routine of, first we get up, then we eat breakfast, then we get dressed, we make lunch, we go to whatever, whatever the routine is. And at the end of the day, what's the routine? This is the time to kind of reinforce it. And if it isn't really a routine, to establish one. There's a few things that will just come into play automatically. If dad was the one that took them to the bus stop, and now dad has died, that family is going to have to, just figure it out real quickly. Who's going to get the kids to the bus stop? So, that stuff happens all the time, as quickly as possible because school's the next day or whatever. But that needs to happen. And that is important to happen because kids need to know what's going to happen. But even thinking beyond school, the beginning of the day, the end of the day, what about athletics or sports? How's that going to change, and what are we going to do differently there? And then thinking about their schedule over the course of a year, as seasons change, as holidays come and go, as school vacations come and go, and so it becomes I encourage families to make it a real conversation. Well, this January is going to be quite different. We used to go snowshoeing on the weekends. Well, now we're not going to be able to do that. What are we going to do? Or thinking about holidays, Thanksgiving. We used to, have everybody over at our house and have a big Thanksgiving. And how do we want to do it now? Is there a way to do it that, where everybody can be a part of it, while you want to honor the tradition, but acknowledge that it's going to be different. So that's the other way to think about safety is kind of on a day in, day out, year, holiday in, holiday out level. How is this going to be different? And it can be a nice, opportunity and dialogue and discussion with our older kids, to give them a chance to offer ideas and make suggestions, and even for the younger kids too. But you want to younger kids don't do well with a lot of choices, so you might want to narrow it down a little bit. But so that's what I mean about safety and helping kids feel safe. And the tricky thing is that it's hard to know when we feel safe, and it changes, whether we're indoors or outdoors, whether it's morning or daytime or nighttime, or who we're with, or, who's in the room and what we're doing. So that's why, you have to sprinkle in these kind of conversations and these examples, because your child's not going to come to you and say, oh, I'm feeling safe now. I'm so glad. It's just, it's an unseen thing, and we don't turn a certain shade of red when we're feeling safe, or whatever color, no color at all, actually. So it's this, it's this hard thing to identify. It's so nuanced, and it really is. So that's why I'm saying to kind of come back to it over and over again. Don't just, okay, yeah, I go to doctor's appointments, I'm good, and never come back to that again. Come back to it. Yeah, does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And you've said so many things actually that I'd love to follow up on. It'd probably take us all day to talk about it here. I guess one thing I was thinking of, you were talking about doctor's appointments and highlighting to your kids, whatever positives come out of it. Do you have any thoughts? I mean, what if that surviving parent maybe does have a medical challenge, maybe not a life-threatening one, but maybe it's, moderately serious, and kind of how to talk about that with the kids?
Absolutely. And of course, at some point something will come up, my bottom line for working with kids is the truth trumps. It's not always easy to talk about the truth, or to hear the truth, but in the end, it's the best. And so then you have to figure out and understand your audience, right? So if you have a 5-year-old who, it can be a younger mind needs simpler words, and so maybe at that doctor's appointment, maybe it wasn't all good. Maybe it was, what, I actually need to make some changes here. So then you say, I've got to make some changes. I'm just going to, the simpler the better for your kids, because you don't want to worry them, but you don't want to hide it from them either, because it's going to come out. And when it comes out, I'm afraid that you've, kind of destroyed a sense of trust and a foundation of, relating with that child. And so find some simple language around it. So just that example of, if my cholesterol is high and my weight is high, then I might want to say, yeah, the doctor thinks I need to lose some weight. So I'm going to work on changing my diet. That's it. That's simple enough.
Right. But
and then you wait for the kids. They'll probably have a response. Well, what do you mean change your diet? Well, how I like to have, cinnamon rolls for breakfast. I'm probably going to have to change that. So, but then you're following their lead, if that's their concern or that's their question. So, and this connects to, I could go to it, but I don't know if you want to. But just how do we tell our children the truth, even about the death?
Actually, let's go to that in just a second, because I definitely want to talk about that. But I just your example here about a 5-year-old. What if you have some health challenges? What if your kid is 15, 16, and they're have questions? What would you advise in that?
So then their maturity level is a little bit more advanced, so they can hear a little bit more information. Maybe you could say, yeah, they've been measuring my cholesterol and I've been trying to do what I can, but in addition to not having those cinnamon rolls, I'm going to have to take some, cholesterol is, there's cholesterol, but then there's, they found a tumor or whatever. You can be more, you can give them more information, and, but still being truthful. They actually, I'm a little worried because they found a tumor and I don't know what it means. I have a follow-up appointment next week. And you share that. And then after that follow-up appointment, you know what? They were able to do a biopsy, and at this point, they're not that worried about it. And I have a follow-up appointment in 6 months. And so then after that and you just keep them abreast of it. If and follow their lead too. If they say, "Gosh, didn't Uncle Jack have a tumor there too? Is this the same thing?" And you follow their lead. Oh yeah, that's right. Uncle Jack did have that. I'm going to have to mention that to my doctor, and maybe. So you just have this back and forth dialogue, but it stems from kind of where they're at after you've given them some information.
Okay.
Rather than kind of hitting them over the head with, all the technical terms.
Right.
But if they're interested in that, then you say, "Gosh, that's a good question. Let's see if we can do a Google search on that." Or maybe let me write this down and I'll take it to my doctor and ask. You're validating their concern. You're validating their curiosity. And if your job as a parent is to have, this kind of honest relationship, and you want them to be able to come to you when something else happens that is a big obstacle in their life, it starts with honest dialogue like that.
Okay. And so let's go then to that next topic, because I think it's a good segue.
Sure.
I know there are, a number of circumstances of death that sometimes can be pretty uncomfortable for people to talk about.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking of maybe, a homicide, a suicide, a drug overdose. What do you think? What are your thoughts about how to handle talking to the kids about that?
And actually, my response is, the truth trumps even in those hard to talk about means of death.
Okay.
If it's unspeakable, then it's unthinkable. And if they don't have the truth from you, we all live in such small little communities that the truth will get to them at some point. And then what have you done that, what are they going to think when, wait, you hid that from me for 2 days or 2 months or 2 years? And then you've really caused some damage to your relationship as a parent of your child. Are they going to trust you in the future? Are they going to trust you with their deepest, darkest secrets? And I know it comes from a place of love and care and concern that we don't want our kids to be upset by, the fact that person was, murdered or died of a drug overdose or killed themselves. But the fact is that's how their loved one died. And if they're hearing it from someone who loves them as much as the parent does, then you're already, gained that much ground. And the way that I would approach it, and the way that I suggest families to approach it, is, first of all, this is really hard for me to talk about. It makes me sad. It makes me, gives me butterflies in my stomach. But it's important to me, that I'm the parent speaking, it's important to me that you hear this from me and no one else. You hear it from me as soon as we can. Dad died last night. He actually killed himself, and that's called suicide. So again, very simple language, and then you take a very deep pause to gain your sense of self. But then you have a pause, and that child could then have a response. It could be, oh, okay, thanks. And then they go off and play or write or draw or talk to somebody. Or maybe they want more information. What? He killed himself? I just saw him in the morning. How did he do that? And you tell them, you tell them what you know. If you don't know what happened, then you say, you know what? I don't know. They're investigating. I'm waiting to hear more information. you tell them that. Then you're tag teaming with your child that you're both not in the know.
Mm-hmm.
And but you are going to get that information. But couching it with, this is really hard for me to talk about. It's really hard for me to think about. Whatever is true for you in that moment. I don't know how to tell you this, but I know it's important for me that you hear it from me.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing our kids need is, that somebody somewhere heard a report and then is then reporting to your kid
Mm-hmm.
about what happened. And how embarrassing for that kid, how just tremendously hurt that child could be.
Mm-hmm.
And they could come back really mad at you because you didn't tell them.
It sounds like...
Or they could keep it a secret because the message they got is that nobody wants me to know, so I need to keep this a secret.
And then, so if they do, let's say they find out, but they don't tell you they found out, so now they have this burden of keeping the secret. I guess, what's the risk involved there?
They could be ruminating this over and over in their head, and which is going to keep them from their job of being a child.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute, I can't talk about this, and so it's building up inside. They have to stuff it down into their body, and just the stress of holding that in for a young child, whether it's a 15-year-old or a 5-year-old, can be tremendous. And it could, they could be just walking around on eggshells, and kids don't need that. Their number one job, again, as an 18-year-old all the way down, even, from birth, is play. And play takes on different forms as kids go into tweens and teens, but the important job for them is to play. So that means to have fun, whether it's on the soccer field or in their journals or in playing an instrument. And it's hard for them to play if they're holding on to this really huge thing. And all they want to do it would be great if they could have the opportunity to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the two go together. Actually, what I was talking about, safety, we want our kids to know that they can come to us to talk about things that are hard because you've been truthful to them, because you've given them a safe place. And so when we're talking about really hard things, such as these stigmatic deaths of homicide, overdose, and suicide, if we've given them that safe place, we've validated their questions over the years, whether it's, I don't know how to tie my shoe, or, I don't know what happened, but I think I broke something. If they can tell you those things honestly and be validated by you, then again, it's my belief that when these other issues, if they should happen, but in this case we are assuming they have, then they can come to you and say, I heard this. Is this true? And that's my hope as one being in the world, is that all children have a place, have an adult that they can come to, even with that just rock bottom hard scenario of overhearing or being told information that didn't come from someone they loved.
Mm-hmm. So I think what I'm taking away from this part of the conversation is that by not being really truthful with the kids about really difficult circumstances of death, you could really almost take a terrible situation and actually make it worse. By both not having them feel supported when they do find out, and also by damaging that relationship with you that's so critical to them moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, it can get really tricky too. Sometimes older children have the information and they're asked to keep it a secret from the younger children. And that's not fair at all to that older children. It might, kind of inflate their ego a little bit because they have the information, but in the end, it's going to eat at them too. And especially if they're living in the home together and they have to kind of walk around this elephant in the room for the younger child, um, you're going to you're going to deteriorate a relationship there too.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so being honest, being truthful is, again, it does trump. And I'm thinking about a family that I just worked with this week, and mom has a terminal diagnosis, is dying within the next 6 to 8 weeks, and I met with all of them, mom, dad, and the children, and I was just asking questions about what the kids know, and what their understanding of mom's illness, of her treatments and whatnot. And I learned that one of them had been with the mom, the adults, to one of her treatment sessions, and not the other.
Mm-hmm.
And and I said, I mean, I don't want it to be a judge-free zone, but that child, the daughter who was able to go, she now has a full picture of where her mom goes when she was getting her treatment. And so at the end of the session, they decided and they figured out that there was a way to take the other child as well. And interestingly, they had taken the younger one, but not the older one. So, but it fills in the gaps. And when they don't have the information, they make it up. And oftentimes, with such creative, imaginative children, they make up something that's way worse than it was. And so filling in those gaps, really helping them understand, in a developmentally appropriate way, what's happening, from where is she going for her treatment to, he killed himself last night, and he that's called suicide. So that's a range of information that can fill in the gaps for kids, and really help them begin to process. Because if they're just walking through their day trying to, they're confused about what they heard or what they think, that's what they're thinking about. Their mind is consumed by it. But and they can't, and never mind being sad or confused or frustrated, they're trying to just make their way through that information, and they're trying to understand it. And so if we can help them feel safe and really understand it, then it gets to the bulk of the work of grieving, which is feeling and sorting their way through that.
So let's move into that then. In terms of helping children, maybe there's different pieces to it, and maybe it varies based on age. But I guess understanding their feelings, expressing their feelings, feeling supported in their feelings. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, maybe first, where do you think this is an area that families struggle with?
They can certainly struggle. What when I'm first talking about helping kids grieve, I want to help the families understand that, first of all, grief is a normal response to any loss, any change. We're talking about the death of someone. And grief in itself is a response, is a physiological response, a psychological response. And so just kind of knowing the definition then leads itself nicely into, this is his response to mom's death or dad's death. And then my conversation goes to, and there's not one way to respond. If there's not a right, there's not a wrong, and there's certainly not one. If you're feeling it, or if your child is feeling it, that's their response. And it's constantly changing, by the way, depending, again, where they are at. Are they in school? Are they, is it the weekend? Is it the morning? Is it the evening? Each child kind of has their own kind of rhythm, right? And so depending on all kinds of different factors, they're going to feel differently. And they could have, anybody, but a child could have been hearing, driven by a particular landmark that somehow triggered a memory or reminds them of the person who died, and all of a sudden they're welled up with, oh my God, thinking about the person who died, and whether that's sadness or anger or worried or and so you never know what it's going to take to trigger them. It could be seeing something, could be hearing something, could be smelling something, could be actually tactile feeling something. All the different emotions. Senses. That's the word. Can trigger our feelings. And so, when I'm working with families, I want them to know that if they're feeling it, that's their grief response. And so now it's up to the people around them to support them in that response, rather than stuffing it under the rug or pushing it further down towards their feet, and their metaphorically in their body.
Yeah. So what does that look like? What does being supportive look like? Or maybe what's the inverse? What does being unsupportive look like? What is not helpful?
When we can't talk about it, we suppress it, and it could look all kinds of ways. It could be, we've got someone who shuts down. We have someone who doesn't want to eat, or who puts all of their emotions in their food and eats more. We have someone who would rather just stay in their room and not be, active or, with their friends. We have someone who just puts all their time and energy into their schoolwork. And, and that's kind of their distraction. And so, and those are actually my top 3 questions when I'm working with families. Has there been a change in their diet? Either eating more, eating less. Has there been a change in another area is sleeping. Sleeping more, sleeping less. Harder to get to sleep, harder to stay to sleep. Has there been a change in their behavior? Are they wanting to spend more time in the house, out of the house, with friends, not with friends? And depending on all of those things, maybe it's time to bring in a therapist here, and and work one-on-one, maybe twice a week. I don't know. But when those, they're not eating anymore, can't get them out of their room, their grades are dropping, they don't want to spend time with friends. Those are the big ones. And I want to look into that a lot more. And one of the ways I might look into that is asking the family, the adults in the family, well, do you guys talk about what happened? Do you have pictures out? Does anybody see, any kind of emotion? You tell me how sad you are, but do your kids know that? And so I want my adults that I work with to know that kids learn from us. So they're watching you. And if you are, sad and tears are coming and, it's just hard and people know it around the house, then they pick up on that and oh, okay, so that's how I show my sadness. That's how it's hard. The trick is, if the adult's emotions are so big and take up so much space in the room, in the house, that adult can't get out of bed, can't get food, from the refrigerator to the table, or, is missing work, or, doesn't want to get dressed, then the adult needs to make sure that they're getting their support, because our kids are 100% dependent on us. The adults have resources, some of us more than others, sure, but you're the one who knows how to call for help. You're the one who knows how to, drive a car to a hospital. Your kids don't. And so I want my adults to know that your kids aren't going to be doing that well unless you are. And it's that, the thing on the airplane. Your oxygen mask goes on yourself first before your kids. You cannot be of any help to your kids until you've helped yourself. And especially in that extreme situation where they can't leave their room, or they can't go to work, or they can't, they're not going to the grocery store and there's no food on the table.
Mm-hmm.
So then those adults need to reach out to family or friends or clergy or doctors or therapists, because your kids are going to really suffer. So that's another way that I help parents kind of measure or gauge if how their kids are going to do. And I like to think of it as a seesaw, and our goal is to find a balance. I mean, of course, lots of kids like the seesaw, like to slam it on the ground and go up really high. So that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about, we want to keep it balanced.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're doing okay, your kids are going to be doing okay. When you're doing, okay, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy and it's not going to be hard. But if, your kids see you getting food on the table, then that means you can be there for them when they are expressing themselves or asking those questions.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not going to ask those questions. They're not going to express themselves if they get the message, however slight, that in our family we don't express ourselves.
Hmm.
And they will get that if there's no adult talking about what happened, or looking at pictures. If maybe somebody goes through and puts all the pictures away
Mm-hmm.
because they don't want to go there, or nope, we had the funeral. It's been a month. That was last month. We're not doing that now.
Mm.
There's lots of different ways that kids can get messages from adults, because they are the experts of us, our children, and so they're watching us every second of every day, and they're learning every little bit from us.
Hmm.
So we need to be their role models for how to express ourselves, how to talk, how to get help, and how to take care of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Did that answer the question, or did I bring up more time?
No, there's so many fascinating things to follow up on here. It almost sounds like there's kind of a sweet spot between expressing enough, letting your kids see that you're
Yep.
grieving and that you're handling it,
Mm-hmm.
and not overwhelming them with your adult emotion. Because I think there's the flip side. I sometimes hear about, you don't want the kid to think they now have to take care of you.
Exactly. Yep.
So that's kind of a tricky one.
It's very tricky. And yeah, the sweet spot is the goal. It's just tricky because it's going to change every day.
Mm-hmm.
So then for adults, make sure you're getting your adult-centered support.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's, a running group or a knitting group, where you have your outlets, whatever that may be, and
Mm-hmm.
whatever fits into your family budget,
Mm-hmm.
is really key.
Mm-hmm.
But and will help you get to that sweet spot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then the other piece I'm thinking about in what you said, I think sometimes parents have an impulse to fix their child's emotion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, yes. So just as I've said, if your child is feeling it, that's their grief, and we want to give them a safe place to express it and to have it. Rather than, fixing it is, that's a definitely, right in our wheelhouse as parents. We don't want to hurt. We don't want to see our kids hurting. And so as much as you can, and at first it might feel very foreign and you can only do it for a minute or so, but try it. And it's going to take practice. But, if you see your kid, or you have a sense that your kid is being troubled by something, from their father or mother, sister, whatever's death, put an arm around them. Gosh, it looks like you're having a hard day. Do you want to talk about it?
Mm.
And just that, kind of like an I statement. I don't know for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but are you having a hard day?
Mm-hmm.
Is this hard? If you're watching a movie and something in it triggers a memory, and you look over and somebody is crying, or their body language tells you that they're really upset, pause it and say, am I, coming from left field here, but are you okay? And just that simple question is you're validating that you see something and that you're opening the door to a conversation to talk about it. And the more you do that, the more they'll get comfortable hearing and hearing your questions, and they'll open up to you. I love last fall had a family come to our program. Grandparents died suddenly in a car accident, instantly and suddenly. And family came in, 2-parent family with 2 kids. And after a few sessions together, the adults reported out in the group that they got a couple dozen eggs. And they went way out in their backyard and they started throwing eggs, all of them together, not at each other, at the fence or a tree or whatever. And along with throwing it, they talked about how mad they were that Grandma and Grandpa had, died and that weren't in their lives. And I just loved how it was a family activity and it involved movement and there was, and there was also talking that went with it. And then they came back subsequent Sundays and they talked about, doing that again. So it modeled to the kids that the adults are mad and it's okay to be mad. And this is what we do with our anger. We don't hurt ourselves. We don't hurt each other. We get it out. And in our family, we do that together. And in fact, that message of, when I was talking about earlier about talking about the truth, that's another message that I want to say is that when kids hear the truth from us and they know that the family is together in this, the message is in our family, we work through hard things together. And if that message can if kids growing up in a family and get that message, what are they going to do when they get older? They're going to have some really good coping skills for how to deal with hard things because they learned it in their family that in our family we deal with this together. So it has the possibilities are endless, in terms of the ripple effect of that.
Yeah.
And,
I love that idea. I think I might be going to buying some eggs and trying that this weekend.
Oh, I know. There's, I have a caveat, which is, they were throwing food and there's many food insecure families. So that part is a little hard for me, but you could do other things. I don't know about in Seattle, but we have snow on the ground. Make a target on a tree and throw snowballs, or throw rocks in the ocean or rocks in a creek. In fact, that reminds me of another activity that I've done with high school kids. Actually, it could be done for all ages, but I started it with high schools. Each participant was invited to think of taking an image or thinking of an image from the death and making that into a target. So, and then on our whiteboard or whatever, every situation is different, but draw it on a piece of paper. We tape it up onto a board or a wall, and then we go through either a recycling bin and we, crumble up the paper, and we have target practice on the target. So it's similar to the egg thing. But the kid goes a little bit further in the sense that the kid actually thinks about, what am I so mad about? With what image comes to mind? Is it an alcohol, a bottle of alcohol? Is it a cancer cell? Is it the rope that symbolizing the person hung themselves? So that act right there of taking it, thinking about it and then drawing a picture of it and then having target practice on it. These kids, it's been a really powerful activity.
Yeah. I love that. Let's go into a couple more practical things too.
Sure.
Before we run out of time here, this has been great. I wonder if you have any thoughts about helping kids remember, commemorate that deceased,
Yes.
whether it's a birthday, a death anniversary, some other any kind of practical ideas around that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, commemorating those in our lives who have died is really important, and should go above and beyond the funeral. It could be just the child doing themselves, carrying a picture in their pocket to school, and just having that picture in their pocket, or hanging it up in their locker, or carrying it in their backpack, and being able to look at it can warm their heart at a time during their day when they needed it most.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be, so that's pretty simple one-on-one kind of thing. Commemorating could involve, thinking of a park bench and having a park bench in honor. In fact, I'm a runner, and we came across a new bench in one of our paths, and it was in memory of a person who used to walk those paths a lot. So that in itself was a commemorative act for that family, remembering the person who died. But then it was they really paid it forward because we could sit on it, or the general public can do that. But that's a very public way. In getting back to kind of in the home, remembering the person who has died day in and day out, whether it's playing their favorite music and having a dance party, to their favorite band or their favorite genre, or watching a movie that they really liked, as long as it's age appropriate for the audience, of course. But having a movie night, where we're all coming together and we're going to remember this person in this way by watching this film, or maybe at the dinner table, once a month we serve their favorite, food, whether it's main dish or appetizer or whatever, or their favorite dessert, and light a candle. So the family is coming together and taking time out of their, typical dinners through food, and, making something that was significant to the person who died, which actually connects to every December in our fall program. We share a memory meal, and every family is invited. It's potluck style. Every family is invited to bring in a dish to share that was significant to the person who died. It was either something they liked to make or something they liked to eat. And it's just fabulous, because we can all share, and it's another way to remember the person who has died.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an opportunity to, I've seen making things with the items of clothes of the person who died. A girlfriend brought her friends together to make a quilt using her mom's shirts after her mom died. And it was really sweet because, some of the shirts had like paint stain. She's like, no, the paint stain needs to be in the fabric that's going on the quilt, I was like, okay. But some other things, I'm looking in my office right now. We have, we did an activity that was fashioned after the Tibetan prayer flags, where every family got a different square of fabric, and using, markers and whatever, they worked together to decorate a piece of, their square. So I'm looking at hearts, and I see a picture of a slide, and I see a sunshine, and each kid could contribute to that. And some people wrote the name of the person, some wrote the nickname, some wrote all kinds of fun things. So finding an activity, however small, to remember things that they like to do, things that they remember how they looked, or things that they said, things that they like to eat. Maybe taking a walk in their, in their favorite forest can be a commemorative act, because you're doing it in memory of the person who died. And commemoration is important. It reminds us that our love for them is not going to die, even though their physical body isn't with us anymore.
So, let me ask something. I wonder if any listeners might be wondering, is there any such thing as too much commemoration? I mean, if you're doing, is there any point where you're too much, or is the risk really not doing it enough and you should err on the side of doing too much?
That's a good question. I was just kind of thinking in my head, what would too much look like? I would say, if that's your concern as an adult, is ask the family, ask the kids. Okay, we did, going back to that movie night, we did that once a month. Or, do we want to do more? Or do we want to do less? We've got this bookshelf dedicated to, your sister. What are you guys thinking? How's this feeling to you? You don't know until you ask. But then you also need, at the same time, when you're doing these activities, read the body language, know your kids. If they are, they button up when you bring out pictures, or when you start talking about what food item you're going to make at that dinner, check in with them. I've noticed the last couple of times we haven't heard from you. Is everything okay? Is that too much for you? And ask them. Asking if it comes from, if you're talking from the heart, then that's going to be perceived as, an invitation for the other person to kind of respond. And so if it's of concern to you, then check in with the other person and see. Maybe they're buttoned up because, they really want this to happen, or nobody's brought up what they would like, and maybe, can we have my favorite dessert and her favorite dessert, something like that.
Right.
You never know till you ask. But I don't think that there would be too much, especially, if you've given them the opportunity to tell you that it's too much.
Okay.
Our teens, I can imagine teens kind of getting a little embarrassed if, they're bringing their, and all the pictures are still up or whatever, in a separate place. But, ask them and then tell them where you're coming from with it. I just want to, and we're doing this to remember the person who has died. Right. And maybe you're right. Maybe let's cut it down to one shelf or two shelves. What do you think we should keep? What do you think we should put away?
So it sounds like if there's maybe a common thread through a bunch of these topics we've talked about today, is that really being open in your communication with your kids and teenagers
exactly.
really helps with almost everything, it sounds like.
Yeah, I can't say it enough.
Okay. One more practical question. And I can put links in the show notes. Are there any children's books or books for maybe young kids, medium-sized kids, and teenagers that you particularly like that we can recommend to listeners?
Oh, absolutely. Well, my favorite book right now is a book written 80 years ago by Margaret Wise Brown, and it's made for preschool, early elementary. It's called The Dead Bird. But even though it's written written for that was her target audience, I have taken that book into high schools and asked kids to read it. And in fact, one of my activities in the schools is learning what it means when something dies. And so what I love about her book, first, that it was written 80 years ago, but also, so in this sweet little story, they learn what it means when a body dies, that its heart isn't beating, and that it gets cold and stiff. And so as a group, high school or whatever, we talk about, okay, what else happens when something dies? Because I want kids to, it goes back to understanding what happens. It also talks about feelings. The children were sad that the bird couldn't fly anymore. So then that opens up a conversation about, well, what are you sad about? Are you sad, or how do you feel? And then it goes into commemoration, actually. They have a little funeral. And so then the conversation, could lend itself nicely to Did you go to a funeral? What was your funeral like?
Mm.
Or maybe you didn't go to a funeral. What would you have wanted to do or see? Or, what do you think the funeral was like? And what are other ways we can remember the person who's died besides the funeral? So I love using children's books in that way. So that's a favorite one. Another favorite one is by Mark Brown, who did the Arthur series, When Dinosaurs Die, A Guide to Understanding Death. I call that one my one-stop shopping. It talks about not only what it means to die, what it means to live. It talks about the range of means of death, including suicide, acts of war, at birth and old age and accident. I just love it. And it goes on from there. For the older group, I should also say Holly Thompson's book, One Wave at a Time. I have a huge bias because she consulted with me on writing that book, and she incorporated some of our elements of our program into the book. But she wrote it with suicide in mind. And there are some great resources out there for those surviving a suicide. So it's by Holly Thompson. It's called One Wave at a Time.
Okay.
Yep. And then just looking over at my bookshelf, Orchards is another book. Actually, it's also by Holly Thompson, but it's for an older age group. It has a suicide thread to it as well. Joshua's Song is by, oh gosh, is it in here? I'm going to have to just run over there and grab it so I can give you the author. Hold on.
Okay. Just one quick comment for listeners. We'll be sure to put all these links in the show notes so that if you, I'm just mentioning to listeners here, we'll put all the links in the show notes so that it'll be really easy to find them. Great.
Joshua's Song by Joan Hyatt Harlow, and then Playing Dad's Song by Dina Friedman. Both of those are chapter books and are great, just really great stories around how kids grieve and how they could be supported.
Okay, great. Okay, well, thank you for all those. We'll be sure to put those in.
You're welcome.
Okay, this has been great. This has been a very long discussion, and full of it's great. It's so full of so many interesting topics. And actually, I think this might be a record. It might be our longest episode so far. So thank you for that. I just have one last question here. If you could say one thing to widowed parents, what would it be?
What would it be? You've got a very hard job, but not an impossible job. And really make sure you're taking care of yourself so that you can take care of your kids.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, I think that's a great place to end. My guest today is Shelly Bathe Lenn, who runs The Garden, a center for grieving children and teens in Northampton, Massachusetts. Shelly, where can listeners find you or find The Garden if they'd like to learn more about your work?
The Garden is in Northampton, Massachusetts. We are a program of Cooley Dickinson VNA and Hospice. So if you go to CooleyDickinson.org/thegarden, you'll find our page on their site, or you can find us on our Facebook page under facebook.com/Garden NoHo, as in Northampton.
Okay.
And
Okay, great. And we'll put both those links in so they'll be easy to find. Okay.
Super.
Fantastic. Shelly, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Oh, you are so welcome. Thanks so much.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Shelly Bathe Lenn as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 15. We had our first discussion group for the podcast this past weekend with a great group of widowed parents with different ages of kids and at different stages of their losses. If you want to join us next month, you can sign up at widowedparentpodcast.com. It's free, but you do need to sign up. We meet by Zoom video conference, which is easy and also free, so you can join from your home or your smartphone. And remember, you can help other widowed parents find this podcast by subscribing, rating, and reviewing in iTunes. It only takes a moment, and I'd be so grateful if you'd help get the word out in this way. Thanks for listening. Until next week, keep smiling.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.